In 1862, an English surgeon named Thomas Orton was confronted with a heartbreaking medical conundrum. A family of 6 had lost 3 children to an unknown sickness, and now the 4th child, Anne Amelia Turner, was sick. The prior children's deaths had been blamed on diphtheria, but despite living in close quarters with the Turners, none of the neighbors reported getting the extremely infectious sickness. Furthermore, the ill youngsters had not responded to standard diphtheria treatment procedures. Dr. Orton was one of London's most senior physicians, and he had no doubt seen his fair share of unusual medical situations. However, in this situation, a scientist would be required to re-examine an unpleasant idea about a color used in everything from wallpaper to clothes. Colors have long been used in various cultures across the world to symbolize status, transmit messages, and channel self-expression. In the 21st century, most individuals have access to all of the colors of the rainbow. However, not all pigments were previously accessible. Some were not as easily created as others, and some colors found in the natural world had to be replicated by synthetic means in order to be used in a consumable way. Dye manufacturing was difficult, and colors washed out or faded fast in the early days of the process. This explains the names given to particular colors, such as royal blue, a rich and brilliant blue that was exclusively available to royalty. Dye trade had grown into a thriving transcontinental sector by the 1500s. Many European dyers worked around the clock to produce one-of-a-kind, never-before-seen colors for affluent buyers to purchase and launch fashion trends. Green was one of the colors that was uncommon and difficult to manufacture for commercial use, despite its abundance in plants. For a long time, merchants and painters struggled to find ways to make this color stand out. Leonardo da Vinci was known to be unhappy with the fact that natural green paint faded fast if not varnished. It wasn't until 1775 that a new synthetic brilliant green pigment was created. Carl Wilhelm Scheele, a Swedish pharmaceutical scientist, is credited with the discovery after conducting arsenic studies and generating a dark green out of copper arsenic. Over time, these variations began to make their way into fabrics and paints around the world, and they all contained high levels of poison. By the 19th century, scientists and physicians had a better knowledge of the dangers that arsenic presented to the population. After several incidents of wives poisoning their husbands came to light, the House of Lords in the United Kingdom sought to enact a law in 1851 prohibiting women from purchasing arsenic. Throughout most of the 19th century, arsenic was used in 1/3 of all criminal cases of poisoning. Despite this, many doctors were doubtful about how dangerous the substance was. For numerous reasons, including the fact that many of the symptoms of arsenic poisoning mirror those of other disorders, obtaining a complete picture of the effect proved challenging. As a result, it was a potential candidate as a poison. It may be given over a period of many days and had a progressive effect on the victim's health. However, these populations were also prone to the various ailments that were prevalent at the time, and doctors would eventually blame illness on infections rather than poison. Because of this misperception, as well as the popularity of these lethal shades of green, the poison was able to discreetly penetrate shopping malls, businesses, and houses, slowly murdering their unaware occupants over time. Bright green arsenic tones were popular for both clothes and home decor in the 1860s and 1870s. But, aside from wallpaper and waistcoats, arsenic was a regular component of many Western homes' daily lives. Arsenic was discovered in small concentrations in beauty goods, such as arsenic complexion wafers, which promised Victorian women creamy white skin. However, as arsenic's popularity rose, it began to pose a greater risk to healthy individuals, particularly textile and industrial workers who were in continual contact with the toxin for hours at a time. Wallpaper factory workers were the hardest affected. The flock sheets used to produce the wallpaper had tiny fibrous particles that clumped together to form fine dust. Matilda Scheuer, a 19-year-old London manufacturing worker, became ill just 1 year before the Turner children. Her factory job required her to dust fake leaves with a green arsenic powder, which she inhaled for much of the day. Everything she glanced at was green, she informed her doctor at one point. Her eye whites became green, and she began vomiting green fluid. Her death was widely reported, and an examination indicated that arsenic had been discovered in numerous of her internal organs. It was the mid-19th century, and many doctors were beginning to doubt whether arsenic was truly as innocuous as society was portraying it. Matilda's death triggered another warning signal about the safety of arsenic-containing goods. Anne Amelia was battling the same struggle that had killed her siblings and Matilda a year before. Dr. Orton hadn't made the link yet, but he was starting to suspect that the diphtheria diagnosis was wrong. He began looking at the family's living arrangements, which he discovered to be modest but clean, and in capital shape, properly drained and ventilated. He made notes on the Turners' neighborhood sanitation and water supply but discovered nothing that posed a health risk. When examining Turner's bedroom, he did notice one thing that caught his attention: the vivid green wallpaper. He remembered a medical hypothesis that had been circulating, claiming that this specific arsenic green wallpaper was lethal to customers. Even with this concept, he was at a loss as to how to cure Anne Amelia's illness, and she, too, died within a month of being in Dr. Orton's care. Determined not to let Anne Amelia's death go in vain, he requested an inquest and sought permission to conduct a post-mortem examination in the hopes of finding further evidence to support the idea. Dr. Leatherby, a well-known chemist, was hired to examine tissue samples from Anne Amelia's body. After testing the samples, he determined that the cause of death was arsenical poisoning. Newspapers unleashed a storm of articles documenting the Turner children's terrible demise and untimely poisoning by the bedroom wallpaper. Despite evidence of genuine risk, the judge remained unconvinced at the inquiry. He questioned the hypothesis as being objectionable, and maybe tired of the hype surrounding the case. The jury determined Anne Amelia's death was due to natural causes. This decision sparked outrage, particularly among court reporters, with one publication referring to the jurors as a perverse jury. Despite this setback, the tide was beginning to turn against arsenic. Newspapers began to cover more articles about arsenic poisoning. Another terrible occurrence occurred in the United States, this time at a Boston orphanage. Despite these tragedies, the hazards were first widely overlooked. William Morris, the founder of the wallpaper manufacturing firm Morris & Company, flatly rejected the impact of arsenic. He felt that because he had worked with arsenical paints and used wallpaper in his own house, the goods couldn't be that harmful because he hadn't been poisoned by them. However, as the public became increasingly aware of how arsenic was harming both vulnerable and healthy people, Morris came under fire. Eventually, in the 1870s, Morris & Company introduced an arsenic-free wallpaper range. By the turn of the 20th century, arsenic green had fallen out of favor. While no law was ever established in the United Kingdom to restrict the use of arsenic in colored wallpaper, people all over the globe have grown more aware of the substances and chemicals used in various goods, particularly in the new millennium.